After the failure of the 1905 revolution caused by Russia's defeat at the Russo-Japanese War, Russia was returned to an autocratic government. Under the poor leadership of Tsar Nicholas II, the Russian army suffered greatly. Lacking the funds and resources to properly supply their army, troops were forced to strip the arms of their fallen friends and fellow soldiers, and between 1914 and 1916, 2 million Russian soldiers had died. And with the coming of 1917, the Russian will to fight was dead.
The Russians entered the Triple Entente without really being able to keep up with the work. While England and France fought the Triple Alliance on the Western Front, Russia struggled to keep their soldiers armed.
Not only was the Russian army in trouble under the poor rule of Tsar Nicholas II, but also there was the matter of who to fill the army with, because there was no more serfs, so now Russia had to rely on common men, leaving no one to work back at home.
Growing tensions between the common people and the Tsar increased, as well as tensions between Nicholas and his German bride, Alexandria. An ignorant woman, Tsarina Alexandria, had fallen to the charm of Rasputin, an indulgent peasant who seemed to have the power to cure her son of his hemophilia. In an attempt to save the rule of the Tsar, Rasputin, who had been manipulating political affairs in the palace, was assassinated. Now strikes in Petrograd over the introduction of bread rationing could potentially spiral into another revolution. Previously, the revolution had been started by workers protesting in Russia, leading to the infamous and dark Bloody Sunday. Bloody Sunday is the prime example of an autocratic government reacting to a protest when troops opened fire on a group of peaceful protesters, killing hundreds and resulting in the first major revolution of Russia.
The interesting thing about the Russian Revolution was that it had nothing to do with religion, like so many European revolutions had before. Russia had taken care of their religious issues years ago with the pogrom, and now they could really focus more on the social, political, and economic problems they were having.
Efforts were in vain, however, as the Bread and Peace protest resulted in the gathering of the Duma, despite Nicholas's protest, and on March 12, 1917, they agreed to establish a provisional government. Within a week, the Tsarist regime had completely fallen apart. However, the new provisional government was not without its own opposers, the Soviets.
The provincial government seemed like a great idea in theory, especially with schooled men like Alexander Kerensky. Kerensky was a prodigy in the provisional government. He just kept moving up in the ranks until the day the provincial government was overthrown by the Bolsheviks.
The Soviets were the more radical of the lower classes and relied on political terrorism to meet their goals. And with the evolution of Russian government, Russian political parties also evolved and split into two new groups, the Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks, led by V.I. Lenin. Lenin, who was bitter at the ways of the old Tsarist regime after it led to the execution of his older brother, wanted a new Russian model under new economic policies, and in his April theses he outlined his edited Marxism for the rest of Russia to follow. In the end of October, with the help of Leon Trotsky, a military revolutionary dedicated to overthrow the government, Lenin decided it was time to revolt.
And while all of these troubles inside of Russia are going on, there's still a war between countries.
To finally end the war between Communist Russia and Germany, a treaty was signed. In the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, Russia agreed to give up eastern Poland, Ukraine, Finland, and its Baltic provinces. Now Russia could focus on internal crises, such as the one being brewed up by opposition to Lenin and his policies. Loyalists, liberals, and anti-socialists were all opposed to Lenin and his false promises. The Bolsheviks were forced to fight many fronts against the White Army, including serious threats from Siberia. The White Army under Alexander Kolchak pushed almost to the Volga River, with attacks also coming from Ukraine and the Baltics. It seemed the White Army would be able to win this civil war. But in 1920, the major white forces were defeated and the Red Army retook its lands in Ukraine and the Caucasus. The Red Army became well-disciplined and well-supported, largely due to Trotsky. A new policy of war communism ensured supplies for the Red Army. Every man, woman, and child was somehow part of the war, providing supplies, uniforms, and ammunition. All eternal revolutions were now crushed by the Red Secret Police, the Cheka. As the communist regime faced less opposition, the revolution found itself coming to a close. However, communism in Russia would eventually collapse in 1991 when supplies, as well as the people's support, finally ran out.